Cheers, thank you. Morning, everyone. So I'm Euan Wilson. I'm part of the IBM blockchain team. My primary role is in business development, so more on the business end of discussions. So that involves going out to customers, educating them on what blockchain is, or a lot of the time what blockchain isn't, because there's a lot of misconceptions out there. And then taking them through, what kind of use cases are relevant in their industry. I focus primarily on industrial and media and entertainment sort of use cases. And then ideally taking them through some sort of build or some sort of engagement through IBM. My topic today is how blockchain will disrupt every industry. I actually got that from somebody in marketing. They put it forward for me, so then I had to kind of come up with the speech myself. What I started thinking about was there's a lot of industries out there, unregulated, fraudulent sort of industries where blockchain probably isn't going to play a role. So I wanted to change the title to how blockchain will disrupt every one of IBM's industries, because IBM's obviously working in highly regulated industries. Then I started looking a bit more at the title, and I started looking at disrupt. And a lot of people use disrupt around blockchain, and I started thinking, although some of the proof of concepts and the projects we're working on at the moment are around disrupting entire industries, others of them are just around, cost savings or increasing, reducing inefficiencies. So I changed that to how blockchain will change and improve every one of IBM's industries. And what I then realized is that that's a massive mouthful and no one wants to hear that. So I went back to how blockchain will disrupt every industry. And that got me kind of thinking, okay, how actually is blockchain going to disrupt every industry? And what I think it comes down to fundamentally is trust. For all the different innovations and new technologies that are coming out at the moment that are doing things like reducing costs and reducing inefficiencies, very few of these technologies actually focus on one of the key frictions in business today, and that is fundamentally that we don't trust each other. Businesses work in business networks where they know who they're doing business with, but they don't necessarily trust those people. So we're entering into this new era now where trust is becoming quintessential. It's becoming not just individual, so people are no longer trusting individual companies, it's becoming a collective. People now want to trust entire industries. And this new era is still being held back by three of the standard sort of old problems which exist. Fundamentally, this is trust disruption. So even though we've entered this digital age and all of these new exciting innovations are coming through, people are statistically actually less trusting of transactions now than they were in the past. And the reason for that is because these new technologies have come through, we've also had things like cybercrime coming through. So in recent years, cyber incidents have gone up by 65%. And the average cyber incident now costs an organization around about $4 million. So the second one of these problems is the data disruption. So our CEO, Ginny Rometty, bangs on and on about this idea that organizations are only actually using, the world is only actually using 20% of our data. The rest of it is siloed within organizations, so that means 80% of the world's data is actually dark data, and it's not being utilized. And the reason for this is that, again, organizations don't trust that they can share their information with each other. And even though industries are massively evolving and changing due to this sharing of information between industries, we still don't trust each other enough to share. Finally, business disruption. So business is being changed in massive ways. You're having new entrants coming into industries with new business models, new ways of doing things, which is hugely disrupting entire industries. You've got industry convergence, so you're having competitors coming in from different industries and disrupting existing processes. And all of this is causing very complex supply chains. And the processes and the operations that exist today aren't built to cope with this disruption. This is a kind of depiction of a business network today. So we all know that no business operates alone. Within business networks, you've got buyers, sellers, growers, banks, regulators, auditors, all these different organizations who are keeping their own systems of record, their own ledgers, and they're moving that information about the assets or the information around the network. And this is a problem. It's a problem for a variety of different reasons. First of all, it's an extremely inefficient way of doing business. Each entity is having to keep their own system of record, which is creating duplication of information as it moves around the network. It's expensive, because in order to keep all of these systems of record reconciled, you're having to have banks, third-party intermediaries helping out with that. It's vulnerable. It's vulnerable to mistakes, people accidentally recording the wrong information. It's vulnerable to fraud, people tampering with their own books. You see that in business every day. It's also vulnerable to cybercrime. In this business network, for instance, if the bank is compromised, the entire business network is compromised. So then we look towards a solution, and that solution is, of course, blockchain. So hopefully everybody here is familiar with this idea of the shared replicated permissioned ledger. And at IBM, we look at it, blockchain kind of bringing four things to business. The first of those is consensus. So when we set up the network, we're agreeing what the asset is that's going to be transacted. We're agreeing who the entities that are going to be involved are and how that asset is going to be moved. So we're getting agreement amongst the network. We've got provenance. So with blockchain, as that asset is moved through the supply chain or around the network, it's being tracked at each stage. So we're getting this clear history, this life cycle of the asset as it moves around the business network. With blockchain, obviously, we get immutability as well. So this idea that once something's been put onto the blockchain, can't be altered, it can't be changed. So what we have is that trust, that idea that we know nobody has tampered with that information. And finally, we have finality. So this is the idea that if we've all agreed on what the asset is and who's going to be transacting it, we can track it throughout its entire history, and we know that nobody's able to tamper with that information. We all know that we're looking at that one final source of the truth. And what these four things kind of embody in business is going to be trust. Because if I know where the information's come from, I know who's had it, what they've done with it, how they've manipulated it, and I know that we're all looking at the same information, I can trust it. So then we look at the capabilities of blockchain for business. So we've kind of touched on this idea of the shared ledger. With IBM blockchains, what we're talking about is private blockchains where it's permissioned. So you can tailor the amount that you want people to see. So each party within the network is only seeing the information that is relevant to them. So I may want one of my competitors to know that a transaction has happened, but not necessarily how much or the value of that transaction, for instance. So with IBM blockchain, it's all about that permissioning. And then we also have smart contracts. So simply the existing business contracts written in code. So it's very clear, it's a very structured way of doing business. And that also brings out a level of automation that we can add to the network. So this talk was obviously about how blockchain is going to disrupt every industry. So I wanted to put up a slide quickly, which has a number of different projects that IBM is working on across a variety of different industries. Some of the major ones that hopefully people are already aware of is, for instance, our food safety solution, so our food trust solution, which started out with just Walmart in America and how they track their produce through the supply chain. There's two kind of strands to that. One, if there's contamination in the produce, how do we trace that back to where that contamination has come from? And the second strand is around the digitization of the certification that goes along with, so you test the produce as it moves through the supply chain, and you're able to look back retrospectively at that certification. So moving from Walmart to one of our other more well-known ones, which is our work with Maersk, which is now called TradeLens. And that's around the digitization of shipping information. So as ships are moving around ports, they're not being held up by authorities because the right documentation hasn't been signed off, because that was all paper-based before. Now we're trying to digitize that, put that information on the blockchain so that the ships can move freely around without being stopped. So that's a variety of different use cases from different industries. If you go onto our newsroom, IBM Blockchain Newsroom, there's a whole host of different press releases that we've done. And what you'll start to notice is that it started out very much just in finance, but now it's expanded out into just about every industry. I'd be doing myself an injustice if I didn't try and plug what IBM does at this point. So how can we kind of help you with your blockchain projects? Starting out with the technology level, so the platform. So we've got the IBM blockchain platform, essentially a platform to allow you to go in and quickly start building your blockchain networks. We've got two different strands of that. We've got our starter plan, which is meant for more the early sort of projects. You can go in, there's playgrounds, there's sandboxes, you can start playing around, moving transactions around and seeing how the blockchain network would work. And that scales up to our enterprise edition, which is our highly secure, and that's meant for the larger networks as you start scaling out. Along with that, we offer our services. So we've got a blockchain garage in Moorgate. We work in a WeWork there. That's trying to bring people in, doing things like design thinking workshops, use case afternoons, let's sit down, let's storyboard out what the process is at the moment, what the process could be if we implemented a blockchain solution, and trying to work out, get to that crux of, is this actually a good blockchain use case? Because there's a certain unique characteristics that do actually make up a blockchain use case, and I think at the start, when blockchain had just been announced, we were just happy for any use case, we would just apply blockchain to it, but now we're getting very good at finding that exact characteristics that actually do make up a blockchain project. So as well as the services, we've also got our industry knowledge that we can bring to the table, and helping out, build out those small projects into scalable solutions. As well as that, we've got our ecosystems that we already work with, so that's our kind of blockchain networks that we've already formed, such as our food trust and our global trade digitization platform. And we've also been very good at bringing different organizations together. So, for instance, at one point, we noticed we had 7 different banks across Europe all working on the same trade finance solution. So what we did was we brought them all together, and that became our WeTrade platform. So that's the kind of things that IBM sort of can help with. And then what we're trying to do is take people through this kind of blockchain journey, where we start out doing the early sort of discussing blockchain technology, what it is, like I said, also what it isn't, exploring the different business models that exist, and then going through to a bit more hands-on, so creating demos, creating small proof of concepts, and getting a bit more hands-on. This would be where we typically run the sort of discovery afternoons, where we get 8 or 9 people in a room and we start discussing the use case a bit more in depth. From there, ideally, we can take you through to the 2-day design thinking workshop, go through the as-is process, and then look at what this process would be if we implemented a blockchain. And then from there, we do this 6 to 12-week MVP, minimum viable product build, and ideally that's taken through to a scale. So that's the kind of journey we're looking to take people through. That's all I really wanted to say, actually, to be honest. So if you've got any ideas, anything that you're thinking about, you're looking to work on, I'm going to be milling around, so feel free to grab me and have a chat. Cheers.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Euan.